I'm going to share a memory with you this morning that relates to our scripture. And then I'm going to lay a story beside that memory, a story that helped me make sense of that. And I'm going to invite you, as you think of your stories and you see images in your mind, this afternoon, this morning, perhaps even in the week to come, to have that same dialogue and see what light your story can shed on my story and vice versa. When I was young, I thought being a Christian was totally doable. Thou shalt not kill. Check. Love your neighbor. Well, check. Jim Dean, on one side of me, the man who taught me how to fly fish, amazing guy, friend of Harry Bowles. On the other neighbor, Mrs. Caudle made the best biscuits in the whole wide world, had 2 crabapple trees in her front yard, made the best jelly ever. Love your neighbor, check. Love those, pray for those who persecute you. I must admit, I didn't exactly know what the word persecute meant, but it ended with the word cute, so I thought, how bad could this be? I will just pray for those people. And love your enemies. It was easier when I was young because I really didn't have any enemies that I really knew about. All of that changed, though, when I hit junior high school. Daniels Junior High School. It was not middle school. I'm far too old for that. As a friend of mine would say, I'm so old that when I first started school, the first grade was the first grade. My first day at Daniels, I was really excited, a little sad that summer was over, but you know how it is. Towards the end of the summer, you get a little bored. You're ready for school to start. You want to know who's going to be in your classes. Are your friends going to be there? What new people have moved to town? What teachers will you have? When is lunch? All those kinds of things you want to know. And the first day of school, I'm waiting for the bell to ring to go inside. Before I even set foot in the building. And there was this big, mean kid named Billy Tyson. And for some reason, he looked at me and he said it as a personal mission to make my life miserable. The entire year, he did that. He picked on me. He said mean things. He did mean things. He scared me to death. And to be honest with you, I felt like if I turned to the dictionary and I looked up the word bully, I would see a picture of Billy Tyson right there. And all of a sudden, loving your enemies is not so easy. Enemies have a way of appearing out of nowhere. They're like giants that fall from the sky. They just come. For whatever reason, they just want to, they block our way. They want to keep us from going on the path that we're intended to go on. They want to tell us who we are. They want to tell us who we're not, where we can go, what we can do, and what we can't. And for a long time, I really struggled with this. About 25 years after I finished junior high school, I heard a story. And the story helped me. And one of the things that helped me, one of my teachers used to say that the word parabole and the word parallel have the same root meaning. And that the reason parables are so effective, because it really means you lay one story beside another, and you let those two stories shed light on each other. This was a story that I heard that helped me reconstruct and deconstruct my experience with Billy Tyson in the 7th grade. And this is the story that helped me reconstruct the challenge that we're given to love our enemies. It's a conflict resolution story. It was written by Aaron Piper. And I invite you to listen with me for God's word this morning. Once upon a time in the land of Canafloria, there was a man. There was an old man. In fact, he was so old that the children would say to the adults, "How old is that man?" And the adults would say, "I don't know. He was here when we were born. Go ask your grandparents." So the children would ask the grandparents, "How old is that man?" And the grandparents would say, "I don't know. He was here when we were born." So not only did they not know how old this man was, they did not know his name either. And so they simply called him the Wise One. For not only was he very old, he was very wise too. Now the Wise One lived a simple life. He lived in a cottage out in the woods. He wore an old clothes, an old belt. He wore Birkenstock-like shoes. And he ate fruit and vegetables and nuts and honey and that sort of thing. And he spent his days talking with the forest animals, breathing deeply, listening to the trees. Now, even though his cottage was secluded, it lay not far from the main road, the road that connected the capital city of Canafloria to the port city of trade that was the bridge to the rest of the world. It was a very important road because there were always merchants and cart drivers on this road. Now, one morning, the first cart driver of the day was on his way to the city of trade, and all of a sudden, as if out of nowhere, a giant appeared. And the giant looked at the cart driver, and he said, "You shall not pass until you fight me. Choose any weapon you like, and I will more than match you. Be it dark or be it light, I will more than match you, wrong or right." Well, the giant was huge, and the cart driver was no warrior. So he quickly turned around and went back to the city. Now, word of this quickly spread to the king, and he called his advisors together, his executive council of 3. And he said, "What shall we do about this giant?" And the first advisor spoke up, and he said, "Your Majesty, the continuance and viability of the state of Canafloria is threatened. We must take care of this giant. We must do it soon. I say, send in the master of clubs." And everyone agreed. And so the next day, the master of clubs went down the road. And sure enough, the giant jumped out in front of him and said again, "You shall not pass until you fight me. Choose any weapon you like, and I will more than match you. Be it dark or be it light, I will more than match you, wrong or right." Well, the master of clubs said, "I choose clubs." And he pulled out this enormous stick that was made of solid, straight-grained red oak. And the giant looked at it, and he laughed. The giant said, "I have toothpicks bigger than that." And somehow the giant magically reached behind his ear, and he pulled out a club that was 7 times larger than the clubmaster's club. And the giant's club was made of white oak, which everybody knows is not only stronger, but much more impervious to moisture and decay. Well, in no time at all, the club master was defeated, and he quickly ran off. Word of this quickly got back to the king. He called the council together again, and he said, "Still the giant blocks the path. What shall we do?" Second advisor spoke up. And he said, "Your Majesty, the people of Canafloria have the right to come and go as they wish. The very basis of our economic system depends on the merchants to be able to come and go to the city of trade. We must deal with this giant. We must deal with the giant now. I say, send in the master of arrows." Now, the master of arrows was no ordinary soldier. He stood 6'9". He had enormous arms, very broad shoulders, and he was very confident in his ability. Not only had he never lost a fight, but he had won every single archery contest in the kingdom since his 11th birthday. And he said, "I will take care of this giant. I will take care of him soon. I will not even get close enough to him for him to cause me any harm." And so the next day, the master of arrows went out on the road. And sure enough, the giant jumped out in front of him, and he said, "You shall not pass until you fight me. Choose any weapon you like, and I will more than match you. Be it dark or be it light, I will more than match you, wrong or right." And the arrow master said, "I choose arrows." And so he slowly reached over his shoulder with his right hand. He reached into his quiver, and he grabbed his longest, strongest, and straightest arrow. And carefully, he took the tip of the arrow and he dipped it into some poison. And he put that away. And then with his left hand, he reached and got his bow. And he held it high, for he was still quite a distance from the giant. He put the arrow to string, pulled back, took careful aim, and let go. No, as fast as the eye could see, the giant somehow magically reached over his shoulder, and he too had a bow with an arrow on the string, and he fired immediately. And you know what happened? The giant's arrow hit the other arrow and split it in half. But the giant's arrow kept flying, and it landed with a thud between the toes of the left foot of the master of arrows, who was scared. For the first time in his life, he was scared. The master of arrows was so scared, he quivered. And he quickly ran away. And word got back to the king. And the king said, "Still the giant blocks the path. Can you think of no better ideas?" Now, it just so happened that the queen was in the room that day. And she said, "Why don't you send in the wise one?" And the council members said, "What could the wise one do when our greatest warriors have been defeated?" But since no one had a better idea, they agreed to this. And they sent a delegation to meet with the wise one, who listened very carefully. And he said, "I will see what can be done. Go home. I will take care of this." And so the next morning, the wise one got up and he started towards the road, which was not that far from his cottage. But on his way, he came across a group of children, and they were playing, and he looked at the children and he said, "Tell me, children, Why do bullies bully? And there was silence. And then one little girl spoke up. And she said, the bully at my school is not that mean. He's lonely and he's misunderstood. And he only picks on people so he can get some attention too. And the wise one looked at the little girl and he said, you, my dear, you are very wise. Thank you very much. And he touched her on the nose as if giving her a blessing. And so the wise one kept walking down the road, and he stopped at a friend's farm. And he got a cart, and he got a cow to pull the cart, and he jumped in the cart and rode it all the way down the road until the giant jumped out in front of him. And the giant said, you shall not pass until you fight me. Choose any weapon you like, and I will more than match you. Be it dark or be it light, I will more than match you, wrong or right. And the wise one said, oh, I shall have to think about this. And he sat down on the ground and he started to think. Well, the giant sat down too. He didn't really have much to think about. And it was a hot day, and the giant soon became very uncomfortable and perhaps a little bit dehydrated. And the wise one noticed this, and he said, oh, I think it's time to milk the cow. So he went to the cart, and he got out a bucket. And he got out a little three-legged stool, and he sat down, and he milked the cow. And when the bucket was almost full, the wise one reached in with the cup. And he turned sideways to the giant. And he took a long, slow, visible, refreshing swig. And he looked at the giant. He said, oh, are you thirsty? And the giant said, I admit that I am. And the wise one said, well, let me offer you something. And he took the cup, he dipped it in the bucket, and he said, please accept this simple gift from your humble new friend. Take this cup. And the giant said, I know what you're trying to do. You are trying to kill me with kindness, and it will not work. Boom. The giant disappeared. Within 2 minutes, he was back, and he had an armful of food and stuff. He had fresh bread and fruits and vegetables and yogurt and tofu, all the kinds of things that somebody who wears Birkenstocks would like to eat, including kale and arugula. And the wise one sat down and had a sumptuous feast. And when he had had his fill, and perhaps a little more, he said, I should like to tell you something about myself. Although I make no claims, they call me the wise one. And I live in a little cottage just down the road a little bit. Well, the giant listened and he said, well, I shall have to tell you more about me than you have told me about you. The giant said, I have no name, for I come from the union of the wind and a curved mirror, and I have no powers except for the powers that my opponent chooses for me. And the wise one said, I had suspected as much. But it is getting late. May I offer you a ride to your place of rest? And the giant said, will you never stop with this trickery? And he reached down and he grabbed the wise one and the cow and the cart, and he squeezed them tightly so as not to drop them. And he quickly ran them all the way to the city of trade. and he gently set them down. And the wise one said, "Thank you very much." And the giant said, "No, thank you very, very, very much." And with that, the giant disappeared. And the wise one called everyone together in the city, and he told them about the giant and how the giant should be treated. And from that day forward, anyone traveling between the capital city and the city of trade only needed to go halfway, for the giant would carry them the other half. And the people of Canafloria lived happily ever